You know, it amazes me how Americans take for granted our First Amendment right to criticize government, often harshly. For years, Hillary Clinton referred to Donald Trump as an illegitimate president and claimed the 2016 election was stolen.
As I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows.
And then there's John Lewis, who marched with Martin Luther King, said the same thing.
You have forged relationships with many presidents. Do you plan on trying to forge a relationship with Donald Trump?
You know, I believe in forgiveness. I believe in trying to work with people. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You do not consider him a legitimate president? Why is that?
I think the Russians participated in helping this man get elected, and they helped destroy the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. I don't plan to attend the inauguration. It will be the first one that I miss since I've been in the Congress. You cannot be at home with something that you feel that is wrong.
I think Donald Trump, illegitimate, he says. Never mind that Jay Johnson, Obama's DHS, testified under oath, not a single vote tally was changed by the Russians. They tried, but they failed to change a single vote tally. Yet a YouGov poll, 2018, found 66% of Democrats, that's a supermajority, believe the Russians changed vote tallies to elect Donald Trump. And that is why people like John Lewis and others could not imagine how somebody like Donald Trump could be elected. The Ruskies must have done it. And former President Jimmy Carter said something very similar.
There's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election. And I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
In fact, 25% of the Democrat congressional delegation refused to attend Trump's inauguration the third week of January 2017 because they felt the Russians put him there. Now again, their right to say these things is protected by our First Amendment, but we take this for granted. A publication called The Jewish Voice recently ran the following headline: Russian Jewish dissident and vocal critic of the Kremlin sentenced to 25 years for treason. Here's what the article said, and I'm quoting. After accusing Russia of committing war crimes in Ukraine during a speech before the Arizona state legislature, a Russian Jewish dissident was sentenced to 25 years in prison for treason. Here is what he said to the Arizona state legislature, and you can clearly see why Putin put this man who lives in Russia in jail.
Back in 2000, as Putin was only coming to power, and as so many people in the West engaged in wishful thinking that this man would be a reformer, that this man would be a Democrat, Senator McCain, in the South Carolina primary presidential debate against George W. Bush, when referring to Mr. Putin, said that he's going to be one of those people who will make the trains run on time. And that is, of course, a direct reference to the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini in Italy. And, of course, he turned out to be absolutely right. It was very frustrating for us in Russia, for those of us who believe in democracy in Russia, to see Putin's rise to power initially in the context of welcoming and enabling, and frankly appeasement, to use a term from another historical era, but I think one that's very appropriate to use, towards the regime of Vladimir Putin. I can say for one, I realized just who Mr. Putin was and just which direction he would lead our country and the world in December of 1999. I even remember the specific date. It might sound strange, but there's a reason for that. December the 20th, 1999, the day still marked in Russia today, astonishingly, as the Chekist Day, the day to commemorate the founding of the Cheka, later known as the KGB, the Bolshevik secret police, in 1917. On that day, in 1999, Vladimir Putin, then still Prime Minister of Russia, went to Lubyanka Square in Moscow, the site of the old KGB headquarters, to officially unveil a memorial plaque to Yuri Andropov. Now, Yuri Andropov, of course, was somebody who symbolized and epitomized the worst of the post-Stalin political repression in the Soviet Union. He was somebody who was among the organizers of the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956. He was somebody who had for years prioritized targeting and persecuting political dissidents in the Soviet Union. One of the things he did was institute a horrendous practice of punitive psychiatry, when dissidents, people opposed to the communist regime, would be forcibly confined to psychiatric institutions and declared mentally insane and kept there in torturous conditions for years and years. And so it was to that man that Vladimir Putin unveiled a memorial plaque back in December of 1999. To me and to so many of my friends and colleagues in Russia, there were no more questions about who this man was and what he would do. And just to sort of make it absolutely clear, if anybody still had any questions, during the first year of his rule, Mr. Putin reinstated the Stalin-era national anthem of the Soviet Union as a national anthem of the Russian Federation. Russia is a country of symbols, and to choose a symbol like that is an unmistakable message of what direction you're going to take. And so very quickly, the symbols turned into actions, and very quickly Vladimir Putin began to go after independent media, began to go after opposition parties, began to rig elections, imprison opponents, then murder opponents, and very quickly, within the space of literally a few years, transformed Russia from an imperfect democracy that we had back in the 1990s to the perfect authoritarian state that he has built today.
I want to tell you about this truly private messaging app I've been using called Converso. It's next generation with state-of-the-art end-to-end encryption and is designed for people who want absolute privacy and freedom from any form of surveillance, government or big tech. I personally use it. In fact, all of my conversations are on it. There's no tracking, no user data, and no storage of messages on the server. If you want to make sure everything you say stays completely private, you need to download Converso. You can disable screenshots, edit and unsend messages, send GIFs and images. It works internationally and so much more. So get out your phone right now, download it. It's on Apple or Android, and it's completely free. Text me once you're on at 555-358-2019. Again, that's 555-358-2019. This, my friends, is the future of privacy. Now, the Jewish Voice writes, this man, Vladimir Kara-Murza, received the harshest sentence given to a critic of the Kremlin in the last 14 months since Russia first invaded Ukraine. His case has spurred the interest of human rights organizations as well as prominent Jewish activists who have thrown their support behind him. The Associated Press reported that they have denounced the verdict and demanded his release. Amnesty International denounced Kara-Murza's sentence as, quote, yet another chilling example of the systematic repression of civil society, which has broadened and accelerated under the Kremlin since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. The group declared Kara-Murza a prisoner of conscience, convicted for his political beliefs, and demanded his immediate and unconditional release, end of quote. Yet, here in America, we can refer to President Trump as a fascist, a racist, a tyrant, compare him to Stalin, compare him to Hitler. Nobody goes to jail, nor should they. But when Americans complain about politicians who supposedly support oppression, when they refer to people like Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush or Donald Trump as fascists, they have no blooming idea what they're talking about. And it shows you just how little appreciation they have for the freedoms and liberties granted by our Constitution, drafted by founders who believe that these human rights come from a higher power. Tough day for Eric Swalwell, the California Democrat congressman, and his alleged affair with a Chinese spy.
I'm also concerned about people on this committee and their own anti-police rhetoric. This is a defund the FBI campaign effort.
That was quite entertaining from someone that had a sexual relationship with a Chinese spy, and everyone knows it. But
I move to take our words down. Completely inappropriate.
Yeah, stand by just a second while we research the rule. Give me just a second.
The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia and asks if she would like to retract those words.
No, I will not.
So they want her to retract those words, but lawmakers in Tennessee who don't like the idea that they were not talking about gun control the way they wanted to can barge in with bullhorns, get kicked out, and then they're treated unfairly, say the left, and they pull out the race card. Now, President Biden says excessive government spending had nothing to do with inflation, and he's tired of people making that argument.
So I'm sick of this stuff. We have to talk about it because the American people think the reason for inflation is government spending more money. Simply not true.
Oh, really? Are you familiar with Larry Summers, the then Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton? He warned against this excessive spending. This is from an interview he did with CNBC in November 2021.
Larry, you had quite a week, if I can put it that way, because you've been warning on this program and otherwise again and again, week after week, about inflation. And boy, this week we got it. 6.2% on the headline number on CPI, shocking an awful lot of people. I guess I start out with, why did you get it right? And so many economists, including the Federal Reserve and for that matter, the White House, why did they get it wrong?
David, I did, it seemed to me, apply a fairly basic economic model to the magnitude of the demand stimulus, and it seemed to me it predicted that we'd get certainly a significant rise in inflation. And we have a problem, and it's a pretty broad problem, with what I call motivated belief. People really wanted to engage for all sorts of reasons, humanitarian, political, related to momentum at the beginning of an administration, in a very, very large stimulus program. And so they convinced themselves that it wouldn't be inflationary because they really wanted it to not be inflationary. And I think that something we need to do is be much more attentive to the fact that the world is as it is, not always as we prefer it to be.
But Biden is headed up to here, or is it up to here, with those who say excessive government spending is inflationary? Take it up with this Democrat, Larry Summers. Now, yesterday we talked about the widespread rioting that took place in Chicago.
Developing overnight, another large teen gathering in downtown Chicago, ending with 2 teens shot. Hundreds of teens flooded Michigan Avenue last night, smashing car windows, trying to get into Millennium Park, prompting a major police response. Officers were escorting tourists and visitors to their cars in the Millennium Park parking garage. Shots were fired in the crowd around 9 o'clock last night near Michigan and Washington. 2 teen boys were wounded, both in fair condition. No one's in custody for that shooting. One Chicago native was stunned at what she was witnessing.
What I see out here is completely ludicrous, to be honest with you. I'm a part of what I see. I'm from Chicago, and I understand kids having a good time, but this is simply bad parenting. We have to do better as parents. Our kids should not be out here. Where are their parents at? That's my question.
Another male driver was injured when teens started jumping on his windshield, smashing it. Then they beat the man up as he sat in the driver's seat. He was taken to Northwestern Hospital.
That Chicago resident said, "It's bad parenting. Where are the parents?" she said. Well, according to the Chicago mayor-elect, that's not the question you should be asking. He's still excusing the rioters. We just need, he says, to understand the trials and tribulations of being young.
Look, demonizing children is wrong. We have to keep them safe as well. Have you ever taught middle school? I have. Have you ever raised young people? Do you understand the risk that young people take just because they're young? Do you know that home plate is at the bottom of my stairs? I found that out when my son was sliding down those stairs trying to score. They're young. Sometimes they make silly decisions. They do. And so we have to make sure that we are investing to make sure that young people know that they are supported.
Home plate is at the bottom of my stairs. I found that out when my son slid down it. What? Don't hold them accountable. After all, they're just misunderstood by a systemically racist society. It's not that there's bad parenting. It's not that we have a problem with fatherlessness in our country. No. It's just that, these people need to be understood. We need to be more sensitive to their needs. And why have laws against looting and rioting? Because after all, if young people break them, well, it's only because they're being misunderstood. Now, I know you like the show, so hit that like button, hit subscribe, and then scroll down just a little bit. That way you get on our mailing list to make sure that you don't miss any of our videos. For reasons that escape us, from time to time, YouTube seems to have a problem with our videos. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any of them, get on our mailing list. And also, there's a little round donate button. Hit that. Throw a little something in the tip jar. Make sure Epoch Times still continues to giving you hard-hitting, candid, honest programming. Remember, LarryWithEpoch.com, LarryWithEpoch.com. This is Larry Elder, and this has been the Larry Elder Show for Epoch Times. We've got a country to save. Thank you so much for your viewership. Thank you so much for your love. Thank you so much for your appreciation. Out.